Hey my dear listener, before we start, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Comment down where are you from and what's your time right now. Let's jump into the video. Story 1. Beneath the smoking mountain, daily life at the foot of Mount Aso. You wake before sunrise, not because a bell has rung or because anyone has told you to rise, but because the ground beneath your home has made a sound you have learned not to ignore. It is not an earthquake, not exactly. It is more like a low, distant breath, as though the earth itself has exhaled during the night. For the people living near Mount Aso in medieval Japan, this sound is familiar enough that it does not cause panic, yet important enough that it never goes unnoticed. Mount Aso, located in what is now Kumamoto Prefecture on the island of Kyushu, is not a single peak but a vast volcanic system. Its caldera is one of the largest in the world, and even in the medieval period between the 10th and 15th centuries, it was active often enough to shape every part of village life. You live in a settlement inside or near this caldera, where the land is flat, fertile, and unsettlingly alive. Your house is modest, built low to the ground with wooden posts and a thatched roof weighed down by stones. The stones are not decorative. They are there because ash falls are common, and a light roof would lift or collapse under the added weight. The walls are packed with clay mixed with straw, materials chosen not for comfort, but because they are easy to repair. Repair is a skill everyone here learns early. When you step outside, the air smells faintly of sulfur, not strongly, just enough to remind you where you are. The mountain looms in the distance, sometimes visible, sometimes hidden behind clouds or steam. You do not stare at it for long. Looking too closely at the mountain is considered unnecessary, even disrespectful. It is there whether you watch it or not. Daily life begins with tasks that appear ordinary but are subtly shaped by volcanic reality. Water is drawn early, before ash from the previous day's activity has time to settle fully into streams. Wells are covered carefully, often more carefully than in villages farther from volcanic zones. You sweep ash from the entrance of your home not because it is dangerous today, but because if you do not, it will be deeper tomorrow. Farming dominates your year. The soil around Mount Aso is dark, rich, and unusually productive. Rice paddies thrive here, as do millet, barley, and vegetables. You understand, even if you cannot explain scientifically, that the mountain gives fertility as well as danger. Older villagers tell you that fields abandoned after eruptions often return more productive than before. This belief is reinforced by experience, passed down without written record. Yet farming here requires adjustments. You plant slightly later than villages farther away, waiting to see if spring tremors will shake loose ash clouds. You keep seed stores larger than usual, because a single eruption can ruin an entire planting season. Storage buildings are raised and sealed tightly, sometimes with double doors, to keep ash and moisture out. The rhythm of the village is slow, repetitive, and cautious. Tools are checked often. Roofs are inspected regularly. Paths are cleared not just of weeds, but of fine gray powder that dulls blades and irritates lungs. Children are taught early not to rub their eyes during ashfall and to breathe through cloth when the air thickens. Religion and routine overlap seamlessly. Before beginning major work, you stop briefly at a small roadside shrine. It is not elaborate, just a stone marker and a wooden offering box, but it is positioned facing the mountain. You leave a few grains of rice or a coin, not in hope that the volcano will stop, but in hope that it will remain predictable. Predictability is the greatest luxury here. Monks from nearby temples occasionally visit the village. They record unusual sounds, changes in smoke, and the behavior of animals. These records are not scientific in the modern sense, but they are careful and consistent. Dogs growing restless, birds leaving suddenly, or springs warming unexpectedly are all noted. You may not read these records, but you benefit from them indirectly when monks advise caution or prayer. Despite the danger, people rarely speak of leaving permanently. The land ties families here through generations. Ancestral graves lie within sight of the mountain. Leaving would mean abandoning not only fields and homes, but obligations to the dead. Survival here is not about avoiding risk entirely, but about managing it quietly. Evenings are calm. Meals are simple rice, vegetables, perhaps dried fish brought from lower elevations. Ash is brushed from sleeves before entering the house. Stories are told, often repetitive, about past eruptions. These stories are not dramatic. They are detailed, practical accounts. Which wines carried ashware, how long water sources were unusable, which shelters held up best. As you prepare to sleep, the mountain releases another low sound. No one reacts. You lie down knowing that tomorrow may be the same, or it may not. Life here continues not because the danger is ignored, but because it has been carefully folded into every habit, every structure, every expectation. And as you drift towards sleep, you might wonder not whether the mountain will erupt again, but how many generations before you have fallen asleep to the same uneasy calm, and how many more will do so after you. You wake the next morning to a sky that looks unchanged, and yet you know better than to trust appearances. Near Mount Aso, the sky can deceive. Clouds gather and disperse quickly, and steam from vents on the mountain slopes can resemble weather until it is already drifting toward the fields. So you begin the day as everyone does, by checking signs rather than sights. An older neighbor stands quietly near a stream, watching how the water moves. If ash has fallen upstream overnight, the current will carry a faint discoloration, a dullness that is easy to miss unless you have learned to see it. Someone else listens for birds. A sudden absence of their calls means more than any rumor. These small observations are not dramatic moments. They are habits built into the body through repetition. Work continues regardless. Rice paddies must be tended carefully in volcanic regions. The water channels are designed to be shallow and easily diverted because heated water from underground sources can sometimes seep into them. You have learned which paddies warm too early and which remain safe. These details are not written down for you. They are learned by standing in the mud, ankle deep, year after year. The mountain shapes social organization as much as agriculture. Villages near Aso tend to be tightly knit, not out of sentimentality but necessity. When ashfall becomes heavy, cooperation determines survival. Roofs must be cleared quickly to prevent collapse. Wells must be protected. Livestock must be moved or sheltered. No household can manage alone for long. Village leaders, often elders rather than formal officials, coordinate these efforts. Authority here is practical, not ceremonial. The person who knows how to reinforce a roof or read the mountain's moods commands respect. Samurai administrators technically govern the region, but their influence is distant. In moments of volcanic threat, local knowledge outweighs any external order. Children grow up absorbing this structure. They are given small tasks during ashfall, holding cloth over openings, carrying water, helping sweep paths. These tasks are not framed as emergencies but as normal responsibilities. Fear is rarely emphasized. Instead, children are taught attentiveness, to notice changes, to respond without panic. The mountain also influences timekeeping. While official calendars mark festivals and agricultural cycles, villagers near Aso maintain a secondary, informal calendar based on eruptions. Years are remembered as the spring of heavy ash, or the summer when the streams dried. These references appear in oral histories and temple records, quietly shaping how the past is understood. During periods of increased activity, daily routines compress. Work is done earlier. Meals are simpler. People remain closer to home. Smoke or ash on the horizon does not stop life entirely, but it narrows it. Travel to distant markets is postponed. Marriages and celebrations wait. The future becomes shorter, measured in days rather than seasons. Yet there are long stretches of calm. During these times, the mountain feels almost generous. Volcanic soil produces strong crops. Grass grows thick for animals. Hot springs nearby provide warmth and healing. Bathing in naturally heated water is common, and though it carries religious overtones, it is also deeply practical. Aches fade. Skin conditions improve. The mountain gives back in quiet ways. Temples and shrines near Aso play a dual role. They are spiritual centers but also repositories of memory. Monks keep records of eruptions, weather changes, and unusual phenomena. These records are not always precise by modern standards, but they are consistent. Over time, patterns emerge. Certain signs precede eruptions more often than others. Certain winds carry ash farther. You may not read these records, but you feel their influence when monks recommend offerings, fasting, or temporary relocation. These suggestions are rarely framed as commands. They are presented as guidance, grounded in experience rather than fear. Temporary relocation is a known practice here. When activity increases beyond a certain threshold, families move to prearranged shelters farther from the mountain. These shelters are not permanent villages, but simple structures maintained collectively. Leaving is inconvenient and disruptive, but it is not seen as failure. It is simply another rhythm imposed by the land. Returning after an eruption is both hopeful and methodical. Ash must be cleared carefully to avoid stirring it into the air. Fields are inspected for damage, but also for opportunity. Older farmers know that some plots will recover better than others. Decisions are made slowly, with consultation. No one rushes to rebuild exactly as before. Death is present but rarely sensationalized. When eruptions claim lives, the losses are recorded, mourned, and absorbed into communal memory. Graves are sometimes relocated if ash makes old burial grounds inaccessible. This movement of the dead reinforces the sense that permanence is flexible here. What matters is continuity, not location. As seasons pass, you notice how little of this life would make its way into grand historical accounts. There are no battles, no famous names, no dramatic proclamations. And yet, every choice where to build, when to plant, when to leave represents a careful negotiation with an unstable world. At night, you listen again to the mountain. Sometimes it is silent. Sometimes it murmurs. You do not expect certainty. You expect patterns, hints, probabilities. Living here has taught you that survival does not come from controlling nature, but from paying attention to it longer than others might. And as you lie awake, you may find yourself wondering how these quiet systems of knowledge, never written for outsiders, manage to endure across centuries of uncertainty. And what would happen if the mountain one day changed its language entirely? When the mountain finally changes its rhythm, you sense it before you understand it. The signs are subtle at first, almost disappointing in their ordinariness. The air feels heavier. The usual sulfur scent sharpens slightly. Livestock grow restless in ways that are difficult to describe but immediately recognizable if you have lived here long enough. Nothing dramatic happens all at once, and that is what makes the moment dangerous. In the days before a significant eruption, the village does not panic. Panic would waste energy. Instead, there is a gradual tightening of routine. Fewer people sleep deeply. Tools are kept closer at hand. Important items, seed sacks, family records, small religious objects are moved nearer to doors. These actions are not announced. Everyone simply notices everyone else doing them and follows suit. When ash begins to fall in earnest, it does so quietly. At first it resembles mist, settling on leaves and roof beams without sound. You sweep it away out of habit, still unsure whether this will be a brief event or something larger. But soon the sky dims. Daylight turns flat and gray. The mountain is no longer visible, and that absence feels heavier than its presence ever did. At this point, the village elders make a decision that has been rehearsed many times. Families with young children and the elderly are told to leave first. They take familiar paths to higher ground or to shelters maintained for this purpose. These shelters are simple wooden structures with thick walls, positioned where ashfall tends to be lighter. They are stocked with basic supplies, refreshed each year even when unused. Those who remain behind do so with intention. Someone must protect stored grain. Someone must clear roofs before they collapse. Someone must watch the water sources and close them if contamination becomes severe. Staying is not bravery in the heroic sense. It is responsibility divided unevenly, accepted without ceremony. The eruption itself, when it comes, is loud but brief. A column of ash and smoke rises, darkening the sky completely for a time. Stones may fall nearby but rarely reach the heart of the village. The danger here is less explosive force and more accumulation, ash piling on roofs, ash clogging lungs, ash seeping into every uncovered space. During these hours, you move slowly and deliberately. Breathing is done through cloth. Eyes are kept low. Communication happens through gestures more than words. The sound of the mountain dominates everything else, a continuous roar that makes conversation unnecessary and impossible. Eventually, the sound fades. Ash continues to fall, but more lightly. The sky begins to lighten, though the sun remains hidden. This is the moment when the village changes from endurance to assessment. People emerge carefully, counting roofs, checking for collapsed structures, listening for trapped animals. Losses are recorded not emotionally, but methodically. Rebuilding begins almost immediately, not because there is optimism, but because delay only compounds difficulty. Ash is heavy when wet. Roofs must be cleared before rain comes. Fields must be inspected to determine which can be salvaged. Irrigation channels are reopened or redirected. This work is exhausting and repetitive, but it follows patterns learned over generations. One of the most striking aspects of recovery is how little is rebuilt better in the modern sense. Houses are restored largely as they were. Fields are replanted with familiar crops. Innovations occur, but slowly and cautiously. A roof angle might change slightly. A drainage channel might be widened. These adjustments are discussed at length and adopted only when they prove reliable. Memory plays a critical role here. Older villagers recount previous eruptions, comparing ash depth, wind direction, recovery time. These comparisons are not nostalgic. They are analytical. The past is a reference tool, not a storybook. In this way, history becomes practical, embedded in decision-making rather than preserved as narrative. There are times when the mountain takes more than it gives. Entire hamlets have been abandoned after particularly destructive events. In such cases, families relocate permanently, merging with nearby villages or starting new settlements on less volatile ground. These departures are mourned quietly. Shrines are left standing, offerings placed even when no one remains to see them. Yet Mount Aso continues to draw people back. Its soil remains fertile. Its water sources recover. Its presence becomes familiar again. Over decades, new villages appear where old ones once stood. The cycle is not driven by ignorance or denial, but by calculation. The benefits, for many, continue to outweigh the risks. As political structures shift in Japan from localized rule to more centralized authority, the villages near Aso remain largely governed by their own accumulated knowledge. Samurai lords collect taxes when possible, but volcanic disruptions often reduce expectations. In this way, the mountain indirectly shapes political relationships, granting these communities a degree of autonomy born not of resistance, but of inconvenience. Over centuries, the records kept by monks and officials quietly accumulate. When modern volcanology eventually turns its attention to Mount Aso, these medieval observations prove invaluable. Patterns noted by villagers' animal behavior, water temperature changes, gas smells align closely with scientific indicators. Knowledge once dismissed as superstition reveals itself as long-term empirical observation. For you, living in the medieval village, none of this is abstract. History is not something that will be written later. It is something you participate in through repetition. Each decision to stay, to leave, to rebuild, adds another layer to a collective understanding that stretches backward and forward beyond any single lifetime. At the end of your life, you are buried not far from where you were born. The mountain still stands. It has erupted many times during your years and will erupt many more. Your children know its sounds. Your grandchildren will learn its patterns. The continuity is not comforting in the way certainty is comforting, but it is grounding. The story of these villages is not one of triumph over nature, nor of submission to it. It is a story of coexistence shaped by attention, patience, and acceptance of limits. Medieval villagers near Mount Aso did not conquer the volcano. They listened to it, adapted to it, and folded its dangers into the structure of ordinary life. Today, modern monitoring equipment surrounds Mount Aso: seismographs, gas sensors, satellite imagery. Yet the core principle remains unchanged. Survival depends on noticing small changes over long periods of time. The villagers' quiet methods still echo in contemporary disaster planning, even if their names have been forgotten. And as you reflect on this long cycle of living, leaving, and returning, you may find yourself asking a final question, not about the power of the mountain, but about the patience of the people who chose, again and again, to build their lives beneath its shadow. Story 2. Ash in the rice fields: farming in volcanic soil. You step into the field barefoot, feeling the cool mud press between your toes. This sensation is familiar, grounding, and reassuring. The rice paddy stretches out in careful lines, its shallow water reflecting a pale sky dusted with ash. To someone from another region, this land might look damaged, even ruined. To you, it looks promising. In medieval Japan, villages that lived near active volcanoes like Mount Aso, Mount Fuji, or Sakurajima learned to see ash differently from outsiders. Ash was not only a sign of danger, it was also a substance with potential. Over generations, farmers observed that fields blanketed by volcanic ash often produced stronger crops in the years that followed. This understanding did not come from theory or experiment, but from repetition: planting, losing, replanting, and comparing results over decades. Your farming year begins with uncertainty. Winter passes quietly, but spring does not always arrive cleanly. Light eruptions can scatter ash across fields just as seedlings are meant to be transplanted. Too much ash can suffocate young plants. Too little rain can leave ash dry and powdery, irritating lungs and clogging irrigation channels. Every season begins with assessment rather than assumption. Before planting, you test the soil with your hands. You crumble it, feel its weight, note its color. Darker soil, enriched by older ash layers, holds water well. Lighter gray ash needs time to break down. You know which fields can be planted immediately and which must wait. This knowledge is not written. It is passed down through demonstration, an elder kneeling beside you, showing rather than explaining. Rice cultivation near volcanoes requires modified techniques. Seedlings are often grown in protected beds farther from the mountain, sometimes even in neighboring villages. Only when they are strong enough are they carried back and transplanted. This adds labor, but reduces loss. The paths used for carrying seedlings are well maintained, because stumbling and spilling precious plants is a risk no one can afford. Irrigation systems here are more flexible than in non-volcanic regions. Channels are shallow, with multiple diversion points. If a spring heats suddenly or becomes tainted with minerals, water can be rerouted quickly. Maintaining these channels is a communal task, performed regularly even when there is no immediate threat. Neglect is dangerous in ways that are not immediately visible. Ashfall changes labor patterns. After even a minor eruption, fields must be cleared carefully. Too much disturbance sends ash back into the air, harming workers and undoing progress. So you move slowly, scraping rather than digging, letting water settle the ash naturally. This patience is learned. Younger farmers often work too quickly, only to be corrected. Crop diversity is another survival strategy. While rice is central, it is never the only crop. Millet, barley, soybeans, and vegetables are grown in smaller plots, often on slightly higher ground where ash accumulation differs. If one crop fails, another may survive. This diversification is not framed as strategy, but as tradition. The village stores grain carefully, knowing that volcanic years are unpredictable. Granaries are raised, sealed, and inspected often. Ash infiltration can ruin an entire season's surplus. You learn to recognize the smell of spoiled grain early before it spreads. Waste is unacceptable, but so is denial. When stores are compromised, they are dealt with quickly. Taxes complicate everything. Local lords still expect rice as payment, even in years when harvests suffer. Negotiation becomes part of farming. Village leaders present evidence: ash depth, damaged fields, reduced yields. Sometimes taxes are reduced, sometimes they are not. In harsh years, families quietly reduce their own consumption to meet obligations, trusting that better seasons will follow. Farming near a volcano also reshapes time itself. Planting schedules shift not just with weather, but with volcanic mood. A year with frequent ashfall may delay transplantation by weeks. A calm year may allow early planting and surplus. You learn not to rush good years or despair in bad ones. Extremes are expected. Animals play a role in these systems. Oxen and horses are used sparingly in ash-heavy fields, as ash irritates their lungs and hooves. Human labor replaces animal labor more often here, increasing physical strain but reducing long-term loss. Manure is carefully managed, mixed with ash to restore balance to the soil. Over time, you notice subtle improvements. Fields that were once marginal become productive. Ash layers break down, releasing nutrients slowly. Crops grow taller. Roots strengthen. The mountain's destruction becomes part of fertility's foundation. This transformation is slow enough that it never feels miraculous, only gradual, earned. Yet this balance is fragile. A single large eruption can overwhelm years of careful management. Fields can be buried beyond recovery. Water sources can vanish. In those moments, farming becomes impossible, and survival depends on stored grain, trade, or relocation. These possibilities are always present, hovering at the edges of planning. As you stand in the paddy, adjusting seedlings one by one, you are aware that farming here is not simply about producing food. It is about reading land shaped by fire, negotiating with forces that cannot be controlled, and trusting knowledge that has never been formally recorded. And as you straighten your back and look toward the mountain, half hidden by haze, you may find yourself wondering how many failed harvests it took before these methods emerged, and how close this delicate system always remains to collapse. As the growing season advances, your attention narrows to details that might seem insignificant to anyone unfamiliar with volcanic land. The color of rice leaves, the way water pools at the edges of a field, the speed at which mud settles after being disturbed, each of these becomes a quiet signal. Farming here is less about force and more about interpretation. By early summer, the seedlings you transplanted weeks ago have either taken hold or failed. There is rarely a middle state. Volcanic soil does not forgive hesitation. Where roots establish themselves successfully, growth can be vigorous. Where they do not, the plants yellow quickly, their weakness obvious. You replace failed seedlings early if you can, knowing that late replacements rarely catch up. Ash continues to influence daily labor long after eruptions end. Fine particles remain suspended in irrigation channels, settling unevenly. This means water depth changes subtly from day to day. You adjust channels constantly, opening or closing small barriers made of wood and packed earth. These adjustments are so frequent they barely register as tasks. They are done almost without thought, part of the rhythm of moving through the fields. Weeding is slower here than in other regions. Ash-rich soil encourages fast growth of unwanted plants, some of which thrive particularly well after eruptions. You recognize these weeds by texture as much as appearance. Some pull easily from loose ash layers. Others cling stubbornly to compacted soil below. Removing them requires patience, because aggressive pulling stirs ash into the air and tires the body unnecessarily. Weather compounds uncertainty. Rain can be a gift or a problem. Gentle rain helps ash settle and feeds the paddies. Heavy rain turns ash into dense sludge that can smother roots or collapse embankments. During storms, you check fields repeatedly, even at night if necessary, using lantern light to inspect water levels. Sleep becomes fragmented, shaped by responsibility rather than rest. The community responds collectively to these pressures. Farming schedules align more closely in volcanic regions. Planting, weeding, and harvesting happen within narrower windows because delays affect everyone. If one field's irrigation fails, it can affect neighboring plots. Cooperation is enforced not by rules, but by consequence. Isolation here is impractical. Mid-season rituals reflect this awareness. Small offerings are made at field shrines, not dramatic ceremonies, but brief pauses. A bowl of rice placed at the edge of a paddy. A moment of silence before entering the field after an eruption. These acts do not replace labor. They frame it, reminding you that effort alone does not determine outcome. As summer deepens, attention shifts to grain development. Rice grown in volcanic soil often produces heavier heads, but uneven ash distribution can lead to uneven ripening. You learn to identify which sections of a field will mature first. Harvesting is planned accordingly. Cutting too early wastes potential. Waiting too long risks loss from storms or renewed ashfall. Storage preparations begin earlier than in other regions. Granaries are inspected while crops are still standing. Cracks are sealed. Roofs are reinforced. Ash infiltration during storage can be more devastating than damage in the field because it threatens the entire year's labor at once. This vulnerability is well understood and preparation is methodical. Harvest itself is careful and quiet. Tools are kept sharp to minimize effort. Bundles are carried slowly to avoid stirring ash from the ground. Thrashing areas are chosen for shelter rather than convenience, often indoors or behind windbreaks. Every step reflects accumulated caution. Once grain is stored, accounting begins. How much can be eaten? How much must be saved as seed? How much will be owed as tax? These calculations are conservative. Surplus is not celebrated loudly. It is absorbed quietly, stored against future loss. Years of abundance are treated as preparation, not reward. Trade supplements farming when necessary. Volcanic villages often exchange ash-enriched crops known for their quality for goods from less fertile regions. This trade is modest but reliable. Paths through volcanic terrain are maintained carefully because access to outside markets becomes critical in bad years. Isolation is a risk no one romanticizes. Famine is a known possibility, but it arrives slowly here. Poor harvests reduce meals gradually. Diets simplify. Rice is stretched with millet or vegetables. These adjustments are accepted without protest. Complaints change nothing. Endurance, not resistance, defines survival. Over generations, these practices solidify into tradition. Children learn them not as emergency measures, but as normal farming. They grow up assuming that land must be negotiated with, not dominated. This mindset shapes character as much as technique. Farming near a volcano produces not just crops, but a particular kind of patience. Yet even with all this knowledge, limits remain. There are eruptions so large that no adjustment suffices. Entire fields vanish under meters of ash. In those years, farming pauses entirely. Survival depends on stores, aid from neighboring regions, or relocation. These moments test the system's resilience, revealing both its strength and its fragility. When recovery comes, it is uneven. Some fields return quickly, enriched beyond expectation. Others remain barren for years. Decisions must be made about where to invest labor. These decisions are collective, debated quietly, informed by memory rather than optimism. As another season closes, you walk the boundaries of your fields, noting changes. Soil feels different than it did years ago, slightly heavier, slightly richer, or perhaps less forgiving. You cannot be certain. Certainty is not part of farming here. And as you consider the coming winter, counting stores and planning repairs, You may find yourself wondering whether this delicate balance between ash and harvest, loss and fertility can truly endure indefinitely, or whether it survives only because each generation relearns it just in time. When winter settles over the volcanic plains, the fields fall silent, but they do not rest. Beneath the surface, processes continue slowly and invisibly. Ash layers absorb moisture, minerals leach downward, and soil structures change in ways you cannot see but have learned to expect. Winter near a volcano is not a season of dormancy so much as one of quiet preparation. You spend less time in the paddies now and more time maintaining the things that support them. Irrigation channels are inspected again, even though water flows more slowly. Ash that hardened during autumn rains is chipped away carefully. Tools damaged during harvest are repaired or replaced. Wooden handles are rewrapped. Blades are sharpened, not because they will be used soon, but because neglect now will be costly later. Winter is also when knowledge circulates most freely. Evenings are long and work slows enough for conversation. Elders recount past years' good harvests, failed ones, seasons when ash fell so heavily that fields disappeared entirely. These are not stories told for entertainment. They are instruction, framed as memory. You listen not for drama but for detail. How long recovery took, which crops returned first, which fields were abandoned. In these conversations, patterns emerge. You begin to understand that the fertility of volcanic soil is not a constant gift, but a cycle. Fresh ash can be destructive. Older ash, broken down and mixed with organic matter, becomes nourishing. Too much fertility, however, can produce weak plants prone to lodging. Balance is everything, and balance is temporary. Planning for the next year begins early. Seed selection is cautious. Seeds from fields that performed well under recent conditions are favored. Those from marginal plots are stored but used sparingly. This selection process is slow and conservative, shaped by the memory of loss more than the hope of gain. Tax obligations loom even in winter. Representatives of local lords may visit, assessing stores and projecting future yields. Negotiations are subdued. Everyone understands that volcanic land complicates expectations, but understanding does not always translate into leniency. When demands are high, villages quietly adjust their plans, allocating more seed to ensure future survival even at the cost of present comfort. Trade continues through winter, though reduced. Volcanic villages often possess grain of notable quality, grown in mineral-rich soil. This reputation helps secure exchanges for tools, cloth, or preserved foods. These trade relationships are cautious and long-standing, built on reliability rather than expansion. Overextension is avoided. A village that promises too much risks everything if the mountain intervenes. As years pass, you notice that farming near a volcano shapes attitudes toward ownership and permanence. Fields are inherited but not romanticized. Everyone knows that land can be taken by ash as easily as it was gained. This awareness tempers attachment. You care for your fields diligently, but you do not assume they will always be yours. This perspective influences social relationships as well. Cooperation is not idealized, it is practical. Helping a neighbor clear ash today ensures help for your own fields tomorrow. Resentment is inefficient. Long memories exist, but they are selective, preserving useful lessons rather than grudges. Occasionally, outsiders arrive, officials, monks, or travelers who remark on the productivity of the land and wonder aloud why anyone would live so close to danger. You rarely answer directly. The explanation is not simple. It lies in accumulated adjustments, in familiarity with risk, in systems that only make sense when lived daily. Over generations, these farming practices leave subtle marks on the landscape. Terraces shift, channels multiply, fields expand and contract in response to eruptions. What appears static from a distance is in constant negotiation up close. The land records these decisions quietly, layer by layer. There are moments, however, when the system fails. A major eruption can reset everything. Fields buried beyond recovery are abandoned. seed stores run low. In such times, farming knowledge offers limited comfort. Survival depends on aid, migration, or sheer endurance. These years are remembered with particular clarity, becoming reference points for decades afterward. Recovery from such devastation is uneven. Some families leave permanently. Others return cautiously, testing small plots before committing fully. The first successful harvest after a catastrophic eruption is never abundant, but it is deeply significant. It marks not victory but possibility. As time moves on, the volcanic soil continues its slow transformation. Ash becomes earth, earth becomes field, field becomes memory. This cycle repeats often enough that it shapes identity. You are not simply a farmer, you are a farmer of unstable land. This distinction matters even if it is never spoken aloud. By the end of your life, the fields you tended will look different than they did when you began. Some will be richer, some poorer, some gone entirely. The mountain will have intervened more than once, and yet the continuity of farming will persist, not because it is easy or safe, but because it has been made workable through patience and restraint. In modern times, scientists will analyze volcanic soil and confirm what medieval farmers already knew through experience. Ash can renew land, but only under careful management. Fertility born of fire is powerful, but unpredictable. The villagers' methods diversification, conservative planning, communal labor align closely with principles now taught formally. What remains most striking is not the productivity of the land, but the mindset it produced. Farming near a volcano required acceptance of uncertainty as a permanent condition. This acceptance shaped decisions, relationships, and expectations in ways that extended far beyond agriculture. As you stand at the edge of a field one last time, watching winter light fade over land shaped by centuries of ash and effort, you may realize that the true harvest here was never only rice or grain, but a way of living that balanced hope with caution and growth with restraint. And that realization raises a final question. How did this practical, patient relationship with danger influence the beliefs, rituals, and spiritual lives of the people who depended so deeply on the mountain's unpredictable gifts? Story 3. Shrines, spirits, and fire belief systems around volcanoes. You rise before dawn, as always, but today your steps take you toward the small shrine at the edge of the village rather than the rice fields. The air is cool, tinged with the faint sulfur scent that signals Mount Aso, or whichever active volcano dominates your region, is alive, even when dormant. To an outsider, a volcanic shrine may seem simple or even decorative. To you, it is both boundary and beacon, a meeting point between human life and the unpredictable mountain. In medieval Japan, volcanoes were more than geological features. They were sacred presences, sources of awe, fear, and guidance. The people who lived nearby understood that fire, smoke, and ash were not random. They were signs, messages encoded in nature. Shrines, often modest wooden structures or stone markers, were established to honor and communicate with the spirits believed to inhabit the mountain kami in the Shinto tradition. Your village shrine is small but carefully maintained. Its thatched roof is reinforced with clay, and the wooden beams are bound with cord, not only for stability but because this material is considered spiritually appropriate. You bow as you approach, leaving a small offering of rice, not for protection in the dramatic sense, but to acknowledge the presence of forces that shape your daily life. The shrine serves multiple roles. It is religious but also practical. It is a reminder to watch the mountain closely, to interpret its sounds, to notice the subtle tremors that presage ashfall. Every ritual reinforces patterns of attentiveness. In this way, faith and survival are intertwined. The spiritual act becomes an extension of observation. Monks occasionally visit from larger temples, carrying scrolls that record eruptions, animal behavior, and environmental changes. These are not stories meant to entertain, they are logs of phenomena, often detailed to the point of tedium. On the third day of the third moon, smoke rose from the northern vent, Ash fell lightly. Frogs were silent. Such records seem boring, even trivial, but they are invaluable to villagers trying to interpret volcanic behavior. Ceremonies at the shrine are small. A chant, a bow, a quiet offering. Sometimes incense is burned. Sometimes a small fire is maintained to honor the mountain's element. You participate in these actions because they are expected, yes, but also because they serve a function. Ritual attention reinforces practical attention. Missing a step in a ceremony is less about angering the kami and more about signaling distraction that could be costly in a volcanic year. Folklore complements ritual. You hear stories of tengu or dragons inhabiting the peaks, not as literal truths, but as narrative frameworks that encode real-world observations. A dragon stirring may describe low-frequency rumbles, while smoke from the dragon's nostrils might indicate a minor vent opening. These metaphors are not fanciful, they are memory aids, teaching generations to recognize subtle signs before disaster strikes. Belief shapes behavior in other ways. Certain days are considered unlucky for planting or harvesting based on historical eruptions. These days are avoided not because of superstition alone, but because they align with patterns observed over decades. Following the calendar is simultaneously spiritual and practical. Even architecture reflects these beliefs. Houses are aligned, doors face certain directions, and thresholds are marked with small talismans to protect against ash or debris. These markers serve symbolic purposes, but also remind inhabitants to check structural integrity or monitor wind patterns, subtle but consistent cues woven into daily life. Religious acts extend to communal labor. Before cleaning fields or repairing roofs after ashfall, villagers sometimes perform a small ritual at the shrine. A short prayer, a handful of water, a bow. Work proceeds afterward with renewed focus. The act reinforces concentration and collective responsibility. You learn that intention, even in mundane tasks, matters as much as physical effort. Spiritual leaders, often monks or village elders, act as intermediaries between the mountain and the people. Their guidance is rarely authoritarian. Instead, it is advisory, based on observation, experience, and careful interpretation of both natural signs and ritual proprieties. When they advise caution, the village listens. When they offer explanations for minor tremors, their words guide perception, helping villagers distinguish ordinary noise from meaningful warning. Shrines also record memory. Stones may bear inscriptions noting particularly heavy eruptions or times when villagers sought shelter. Offerings mark survival milestones. These memorials are subtle, easy to overlook, yet they encode centuries of local knowledge in physical form. Walking past them, you can sense patterns of destruction and resilience etched into stone and wood. Religious life in volcanic villages is therefore inseparable from everyday survival. Prayer is not an escape from danger, but a method of engagement with it. Belief creates attention creates awareness, and awareness enables action. In this sense, faith is practical. The mountain demands respect, and the shrine is a structured method of cultivating that respect. As you complete your morning rituals and step back into the ash-dusted village, the mountain looms silently, smoke curling from its vents. You carry the quiet assurance that the combined system of ritual, observation, and labor has been refined over generations. It is neither dramatic nor heroic, but it is effective. And yet, despite centuries of observation and careful practice, you may find yourself wondering, what happens when the mountain acts in ways no ritual, record, or tradition has anticipated? How does belief adapt when signs are unfamiliar and danger is unprecedented? The days pass with a rhythm that is both comforting and cautious. Life in your volcanic village revolves around work, observation, and ritual, but you begin to notice that the boundaries between these activities are subtle. Sweeping ash from the path to the shrine, checking the water channels in the rice paddies, or repairing a roof, each task carries a layer of spiritual significance. Even the act of walking becomes attentive, guided by signs both natural and ritual. Monks visit more frequently during periods of heightened volcanic activity. Their approach is methodical. They carry incense, record tablets, and sometimes small instruments to gauge tremors, but more than instruments, they rely on memory and observation. A murmur in the distance, a slight discoloration in water, or a pattern of smoke rising from the vent is carefully noted. Their notes are repetitive, sometimes tedious, yet these repetitions preserve critical knowledge. You help carry out minor rituals alongside the monks, often without fully understanding the significance of every word or gesture. You perform them because your ancestors did, and because repetition builds familiarity with the environment. Even small ritual acts, pouring water on stone, bowing toward the mountain, offering rice, serve as consistent reminders of vigilance. Each action teaches attentiveness, the kind of skill that could save lives in the unpredictable presence of volcanic activity. In addition to monks, elders play a critical role. They recount historical eruptions in precise detail, noting wind direction, ash thickness, rainfall patterns, and human responses. These stories are devoid of dramatization. They focus on measurable outcomes. One elder may tell of a summer when ash fell for 3 weeks and irrigation channels were completely clogged, while another describes a minor eruption that enriched fields unexpectedly. These accounts guide decision-making in both agriculture and daily routines. Children in the village grow up participating in these practices almost unconsciously. They learn to bow at the shrine, carry offerings, and watch the mountain. They also learn to interpret more subtle signs: the restless movements of animals, the whisper of ash in the wind, the slight tremors beneath their feet. Over time, these lessons become instinctive. Survival in a volcanic village depends not just on skill, but on generations of accumulated observation. Spiritual beliefs extend into timing and planning. Planting schedules, harvests, and festivals are often coordinated with the calendar of the mountain. Certain days are considered auspicious or inauspicious, not because of arbitrary superstition, but because long-term observation has linked these days with favorable or hazardous conditions. A farmer who plants on the wrong day may experience failure, reinforcing communal wisdom. Over centuries, these observations form a tightly interwoven system of practice that blends ritual and environmental management. The shrine also acts as a center of social cohesion. During times of minor eruptions, villagers gather here to discuss observations, plan protective measures, and reinforce communal responsibilities. This collective attention ensures that no single family bears the full burden of preparation or recovery. Decisions are made through consensus, with spiritual guidance offering a framework rather than dictating actions. Sometimes the mountain acts unexpectedly. Smoke may appear from a previously dormant vent, or tremors occur without precedent. During these moments, rituals are intensified, offerings increase, prayers are recited more frequently, and observation becomes even more meticulous. These actions may seem symbolic, but they reinforce a heightened state of attentiveness across the community. The mountain's unpredictability is not denied. It is incorporated into the system of vigilance. Religious practice also informs architecture and material culture. Stone markers, talismans, and the orientation of houses are all influenced by spiritual considerations, but each has a practical underpinning. Talismans remind inhabitants to check that thatched roofs are secured against ash, that water channels are clear, and that storage granaries remain sealed. Even the choice of roofing materials is guided by beliefs about resilience and protection. In this way, spirituality and practicality converge seamlessly. Over time, the knowledge embedded in ritual, architecture, and oral history forms a complex network. Each action, whether mundane or ceremonial, serves as a node in a system that balances daily survival with long-term risk management. The villagers' understanding of the mountain is neither static nor simplistic. It is adaptive, refined over generations, and continuously tested by nature's unpredictability. Even so, questions remain unresolved. Despite centuries of accumulated observation and careful ritual, The mountain occasionally behaves in ways that defy expectation. When it does, no shrine, talisman, or record can offer certainty. The village is left to respond with what it knows, improvising within the framework of traditions developed over hundreds of years. As you leave the shrine one evening, the mountain's vents glow faintly against the fading light. You carry with you the awareness that faith is not a guarantee of safety, but a structure that channels attention and action. And you may begin to wonder, what happens to a belief system when the mountain changes its language entirely, when signs become unfamiliar and rituals offer no guidance? The eruption begins subtly, almost imperceptibly at first. A low murmur resonates through the valley, the kind of vibration that feels as much in your chest as under your feet. Smoke drifts from vents that have been quiet for decades, curling upward in thin, gray spirals. You glance toward the shrine at the edge of the village, and the familiar outline of the wooden structure seems both reassuring and fragile. Centuries of ritual have prepared you for many eventualities, but not for the mountain speaking in ways entirely new. Villagers move into practiced routines. Families secure their homes, sweep ash from paths, and check that granaries are sealed. Elders direct children to carry small offerings from the shrine toward safer areas, symbolically transferring blessings from hearth to refuge. No one panics. Panic is a waste. Preparation is necessary. The rituals you have repeated countless times become intertwined with action. Bowing, chanting, and physical labor blend into a single rhythm of attentiveness. Ash begins to fall lightly, gray powder settling on rooftops and fields. It thickens gradually, coating every surface. The air is acrid, making breathing difficult. You cover your mouth with cloth, eyes stinging as you move deliberately through the village. Monks and elders circulate, observing ash accumulation, checking irrigation channels, and noting which roofs are in danger of collapse. Every gesture, no matter how small, carries both practical and spiritual significance. During these hours, the shrine serves as more than a spiritual anchor. It is a command center of sorts, a place where villagers gather briefly to coordinate response, share observations, and reinforce communal effort. Offerings are placed, incense is lit, and brief prayers are recited, not out of expectation that the mountain will cease, but as a focus for attention and coordination. Faith here is inseparable from survival. Children who have trained their attention through ritual and work carry messages between families, check animals, and monitor ash accumulation in small channels. Their involvement is not symbolic, it is functional. Through repetition, the younger generation participates in the village's defensive network. Rituals and observant labor reinforce one another, each amplifying the effectiveness of the other. As the eruption progresses, tremors increase. Stones dislodge from slopes, rolling down paths that villagers have learned to avoid. Smoke thickens, visibility declines. Yet even in this chaos, there is a calm born of practice. Everyone knows their responsibilities. Every task, moving livestock, clearing roofs, adjusting water flow, is performed slowly, deliberately, and repeatedly. The mountain's threat is present, but it is met with method, not panic. When the peak of activity subsides, villagers emerge cautiously. Ash is swept away carefully to avoid stirring dust back into the air. Water channels are cleared. Fields are inspected for damage, noting which patches can be salvaged. Roofs are reinforced in preparation for the next event. These recovery tasks are guided by memory encoded in ritual, oral history, and repeated practice. They are not heroic acts, they are methodical, sustained, and communal. In the aftermath, the shrine becomes a place of reflection. Small offerings are replenished, prayers recited for protection in future seasons, and elders recount the eruption's details. These accounts are devoid of dramatization. They focus on measurable outcomes: ash depth, wind direction, damage assessment. Stories that may seem boring to outsiders are vital to the village's accumulated knowledge and resilience. Ritual ensures these lessons are preserved and transmitted effectively. Over decades, these cycles of eruption and response shape more than survival skills. They shape worldview. The mountain is not merely a hazard, it is a teacher. Villagers learn that attentiveness, patience, and precise observation are as critical as strength or speed. Faith is reframed. It is not supplication for protection, but cultivation of the skill and discipline required to coexist with a volatile landscape. The knowledge embedded in ritual and daily life endures, bridging generations. Modern scientists examining volcanic soils and historical records later validate many of these empirical practices. Animals, behaviors, tremors, minor gas emissions, all meticulously noted in religious or oral frameworks align with indicators now recognized in volcanology. Practices once seen as superstition reveal themselves as practical, adaptive systems refined over centuries. As you walk past the shrine at sunset, the mountain quiet again, you reflect on the duality of this life. Faith as both spiritual and practical, ritual as both symbolic and functional. This delicate balance has enabled survival in a world where the ground beneath your feet can change without warning. And you are left with a thought that lingers beyond the immediate season. The mountain will continue to speak, in ways known and unknown. And perhaps the most remarkable thing of all is that generations of ordinary villagers, guided by subtle observation, ritual, and attention, have learned not to silence its voice but to listen, interpret, and live in harmony with it. Story 4. When the mountain spoke oral memory and disaster warnings. The mountain speaks, though not in words. Its language is subtle, conveyed through trembling earth, shifting smoke, restless animals, and the fine gray dust that drifts from its slopes. In medieval Japanese villages near active volcanoes, survival depended on listening carefully, learning to recognize patterns that could warn of impending eruptions or dangerous ashfall. Long before seismographs or written scientific records, communities relied on oral memory, shared observation, and quiet attentiveness. You rise at dawn to check your surroundings, as you have done every day since childhood. The village is nestled in a broad valley, the fields dark with rich volcanic soil. From this vantage point, the mountain dominates the horizon, a living presence rather than a distant backdrop. Its activity is unpredictable yet patterned, and you have learned over years to distinguish ordinary tremors from those that matter. A small shift in the wind, a subtle change in the rhythm of smoke, or the unusual silence of birds can indicate the mountain is stirring. These cues are not dramatic. They are easily overlooked by the inattentive. Missing them can be costly. Oral tradition preserves this knowledge. Elders recount stories of eruptions, careful to include details such as the direction ash traveled, the duration of tremors, and how livestock behaved. Each account is structured to be memorable. Repetition and cadence help embed lessons in the listener's mind. Children accompany adults to the fields, learning to interpret signs through demonstration rather than through books. Observation and repetition are the primary tools for survival. One particularly memorable story concerns a spring eruption that occurred when ash fell gently for 3 days before a sudden, intense outburst. The villagers had initially assumed the ash was minor, but elders remembered a similar pattern decades earlier. They acted preemptively, moving livestock to higher ground and securing granaries. The result was a significant reduction in loss, though fields were still affected. This story, retold year after year, taught that early signs should never be ignored, even when they seem innocuous. The village develops its own informal warning system. Certain families, known for their skill in reading natural signs, patrol the edges of the community daily. They report tremors, unusual animal behavior, or changes in the mountain's venting patterns. Their observations are relayed to the village assembly, which then decides whether to adjust routines or temporarily relocate vulnerable families. Decisions are rarely hasty. Consensus and careful interpretation matter more than speed. Animals are central to these early warnings. Dogs, chickens, and goats exhibit restlessness before eruptions, often fleeing to higher ground or refusing food. Villagers notice these behaviors and treat them as part of the mountain's language. Even subtle cues, frogs going silent in rice paddies, swallows leaving suddenly, are incorporated into predictive knowledge. Over generations, these signs become embedded in memory, repeated in stories and reinforced through ritual observation. Stories are also mnemonic devices. The events themselves are mundane ash accumulating, water turning muddy, roofs needing repair, but repetition ensures that the lessons survive. Elders tell children not only what happened, but how it was detected and what the village did in response. These accounts are delivered plainly, emphasizing process over drama. The goal is not entertainment, it is retention of practical knowledge. Paths and markers in the village are likewise embedded with memory. Certain stones indicate the high water mark of past mud flows. Trees may bear carvings noting the direction of ash from previous eruptions. Small shrines near fields record the years when the mountain spoke most loudly, often with inscriptions describing the outcomes for crops or livestock. Walking through the village, you are literally moving through layers of remembered events, encoded in both oral tradition and physical markers. Even songs and chants carry information. Some melodies recount sequences of signs that preceded eruptions or the best ways to respond to ashfall. Rhythm, repetition, and rhyme make the information easier to recall, especially for children. These are not celebrations. They are functional memory aids embedded in daily life. Yet despite centuries of accumulated knowledge, uncertainty remains. The mountain occasionally behaves in ways that contradict prior patterns. Oral memory, no matter how carefully preserved, cannot guarantee safety. Villagers rely on interpretation, caution, and experience to navigate these anomalies. They understand that their survival depends not on certainty, but on attentiveness and adaptability. As you pause near a small lookout at the edge of the village, listening to the faint tremor beneath your feet, you understand that the mountain's voice is continuous. It never speaks loudly. It never demands. It communicates in subtle rhythms, and survival depends on hearing what others might dismiss. This language is learned slowly, through careful observation, repetition, and the guidance of those who came before you. And as you reflect on the intricate web of oral knowledge and lived experience, you may wonder, how many generations have passed, silently listening, repeating and teaching, preserving the mountain's language, and how many more will need to do so before a new, unprecedented eruption changes everything? The mountain's signals are rarely dramatic. A gentle tremor rattles dishes, a thin veil of smoke curls upward from a vent, or ash drifts slowly across fields. Each event is examined closely, compared with memories and stories passed down through generations. Villagers develop a keen ability to discern nuanced small differences in sound, movement, or color, can signify a minor rumble or a prelude to something more severe. Elders take central roles in interpreting these signs. Their authority is earned through years of observation rather than official appointment. They recall details from eruptions decades past, which direction ash traveled, which winds carried it, how rainfall affected the soil, which crops survived, which failed. This knowledge is precise, often painstakingly so, because minor errors could lead to catastrophic consequences. You participate actively in this network. Each morning, you check animal behavior, observe water levels in streams and irrigation channels, and note any unusual discoloration of soil or foliage. These observations are shared during brief gatherings, often in front of shrines or under large trees, where elders confirm, correct, or interpret what has been seen. The process is methodical, repetitive, almost ritualized. It is a quiet system of early warning. Communication among villagers is subtle and deliberate. A slight nod toward the northern slope, a hand gesture near a stream, or a brief comment about the wind can signal significant observations without causing alarm. Children learn this language early, understanding the meaning behind gestures long before they grasp the technical details. This network reinforces attentiveness and ensures that knowledge is disseminated quickly without panic. Oral memory is reinforced by repetition. During communal tasks, repairing roofs, clearing channels, transporting water, elders recount events in chronological order, emphasizing cause and effect. They highlight the small, easily overlooked signs that preceded major eruptions. Children repeat these stories, sometimes as song or chant, embedding practical knowledge in rhythm and rhyme. This repetition serves both as training and preservation. Even minor events are documented through physical markers. Stones or trees might bear carvings indicating the direction ash traveled in a prior eruption. Watermarks on riverbanks or mudflow scars mark past hazards. These tangible reminders, combined with oral narrative, create a layered system of memory that reinforces learning. You can literally walk through the village and read centuries of experience if you know where and how to look. The process also shapes social structure. Villagers develop trust networks where knowledge is carefully vetted and disseminated. Families or individuals who consistently interpret the mountain correctly gain respect and influence. These are not arbitrary hierarchies, they are functional, ensuring that decision-making during crises is guided by experience and accuracy rather than rumor or speculation. Yet uncertainty always lingers. The mountain does not speak in fixed codes. Ash may fall differently than remembered. Tremors may arrive at unusual intervals. Animals may behave inconsistently. In such situations, villagers combine past knowledge with cautious improvisation. Rituals are intensified, observation is heightened, and work slows to ensure careful response. Stories from particularly unusual eruptions serve as case studies for future generations. For example, a volcanic event decades earlier may have produced unexpected lava flows in previously unaffected areas. Elders emphasize the anomalies, teaching that adherence to prior patterns is helpful but not absolute. Flexibility and attentiveness are equally critical. This culture of observation, repetition, and communication is interwoven with daily life. Survival does not rely on sudden heroics, but on cumulative knowledge embedded in ordinary activities. Tending fields, repairing roofs, observing animals, maintaining irrigation, performing rituals. Over time, these habits become instinctive, creating a resilient community that is constantly attuned to its environment. By the end of a season, even minor eruptions leave a trail of refined understanding. Villagers update their oral histories, adjust pathways, and mark fields. Every observation feeds into the larger memory of the community. The mountain continues to speak, and the village listens. Knowledge grows, imperceptibly but steadily, across generations. And yet, as you return from a day of careful observation, reflecting on the patterns and stories, a lingering question emerges. How does a society preserve oral memory over centuries, especially when a single eruption can wipe out entire families and the physical markers of experience, leaving only whispers of lessons learned? The mountain speaks more clearly now, though still without words. A tremor rolls through the valley, longer and more insistent than any you felt that season. Smoke rises in heavier curtains, and ash begins to settle in a fine layer over rooftops and fields. The villagers respond calmly but with purpose. What has been learned over generations now guides every step, every gesture, every decision. Families move livestock to higher ground, covering water sources to prevent contamination. Granaries are inspected, small leaks sealed, and precious stores protected from ash infiltration. Elders circulate among homes, observing tremors, wind direction, and smoke density. Children carry messages, check paths, and assist in minor repairs. Actions are coordinated silently, sometimes through gestures or brief calls, a subtle choreography honed over lifetimes. The shrine at the edge of the village serves as both spiritual and practical center. Offerings are renewed, incense lit, prayers recited. These rituals are not intended to magically stop the eruption. They serve to focus attention, reinforce protocol, and remind the community of patterns established over centuries. Faith and observation merge seamlessly. They are two sides of the same coin: preparedness. As ash thickens, you notice how the village operates like a living organism. Individual actions are meaningful, yet the collective pattern is what ensures survival. The elders' guidance, children's alertness and adult labor converge in a network of attentiveness. It is not heroic in the dramatic sense. It is methodical, quiet, and persistent. When the eruption reaches its peak, roofs bear the first heavy accumulations, streams are partially obscured, and visibility declines sharply. You and the villagers move carefully, clearing ash incrementally, monitoring water channels and watching for signs of structural failure. Every movement is deliberate, informed by decades of oral memory. The lessons of the past small tremors, subtle smoke patterns, animal behaviors guide real-time decisions. In this moment, the value of accumulated knowledge becomes undeniable. After the mountain's fury subsides, the recovery begins. Roofs are reinforced, fields assessed, and irrigation channels repaired. Elders recount observations for future generations, how ash drifted, how animals behaved, which structures failed and which endured. These stories are memorized, repeated, and embedded in rituals, forming a living record of the event. Physical markers, stones, carvings, altered paths supplement memory. Together, oral and material knowledge preserve lessons beyond individual lifetimes. Over decades, this system demonstrates resilience. Families who have relied on oral memory, careful observation, and coordinated labor survive eruptions that might devastate less attentive communities. Minor mistakes are corrected in subsequent seasons. Patterns are refined, becoming more accurate and sophisticated. Knowledge grows incrementally through both success and failure. The village also internalizes an understanding of uncertainty. Even the best-trained observers cannot predict every eruption. Patterns can change, and anomalies are inevitable. The community survives not by assuming certainty, but by cultivating attentiveness, discipline, and redundancy. Observation is continuous, preparation methodical, and learning cumulative. What becomes striking is the subtlety of the wisdom. Survival here does not rely on dramatic heroics or fortuitous luck. It relies on repetition, patience, and careful attention to the mountain's ever-changing signs. Every day of observation, every ritual, every retelling of past eruptions forms a framework for action that extends beyond the life of any individual. In modern times, volcanologists recognize the accuracy of these centuries-old practices. Oral histories, combined with physical markers and community memory, align with contemporary measurements of volcanic activity. The villagers, boring, records long, repetitive, and meticulous, reveal a sophisticated empirical understanding of natural phenomena that science would later formalize. As you reflect on the rhythm of life near the mountain, you see that the greatest lesson is not about ash, tremors, or eruptions, but about memory itself. The mountain continues to speak. The community listens. Knowledge accumulates slowly, quietly, often in ways outsiders would consider mundane. And in that quiet accumulation lies the survival of generations. And yet, as you trace your steps through the ash-laden village, you cannot help but ask a final question. If centuries of careful listening and repetition can guide people through eruptions, what happens when a new generation forgets, or when the mountain changes its language in ways no story, ritual, or observation can anticipate? Story 5. Ash and water irrigation and survival strategies near volcanoes. The first thing you notice when you step into a volcanic valley is the water. Streams and channels twist through terraces, glimmering in the early morning light, their surfaces dotted with tiny flecks of ash. To someone unaccustomed, the water might appear polluted or dangerous. To you, it is both life and instrument, a critical medium that sustains crops, shapes the land, and signals the mountain's moods. In medieval Japanese villages near active volcanoes, managing water was as essential as tending the rice itself. Irrigation here is an intricate practice, born of necessity. Rivers carry sediment from upstream eruptions, shifting channels unpredictably. Seasonal rains can flush ash into fields, sometimes enriching soil, sometimes suffocating crops. Villagers must constantly assess flow, depth, and quality, adjusting dikes and diversion channels to meet immediate needs. Each adjustment is guided by centuries of accumulated experience, trial, and observation, codified orally and reinforced through hands-on teaching. You begin the day by inspecting the main channels, wooden sluices, and small diversion dams. The water level is lower than usual, likely because ash has accumulated upstream, subtly redirecting flow. You probe with a bamboo pole, listening for variations in depth and current. The sound and feel of moving water carry information. Subtle differences indicate blockages, sediment buildup, or potential overflow points. The villagers have learned to read water as they would the sky or the mountain itself. Maintenance is continuous. Small breaches in embankments are repaired immediately with packed clay and bamboo reinforcement. Channels are cleared of debris, both natural and volcanic, to prevent sudden flooding. Even the placement of stones and the angle of sluice boards are chosen carefully, often based on knowledge passed down through generations. Misalignment or neglect can lead to disaster. Fields inundated with mud, seedlings washed away, irrigation diverted from critical plots. Ash complicates every decision. It infiltrates channels, thickens when wet, and interacts unpredictably with water flow. In response, villagers develop multi-layered irrigation systems. Primary channels carry large volumes of water, secondary channels distribute it to fields, and tertiary microchannels provide fine control at the level of individual plots. Redundancy is key. If one path fails, water can be rerouted. Efficiency is secondary to reliability. Coordination is necessary. Irrigation requires cooperation across the village. Diverting water for one field can reduce availability for another, so daily planning meetings occur at dawn, often near small shrines or assembly points. Decisions are based on observations from multiple families. Which fields are most vulnerable, which have the greatest yield potential, and which are most exposed to ash or debris. Practicality governs these discussions, but ritual observances subtly structure timing and attention. Children participate early, learning by following elders through the channels. They memorize flow patterns, recognize sediment changes, and understand the signs of blockages. These lessons are reinforced through repetition, small corrections, and demonstration. By adolescence, they can independently monitor and maintain the system, ensuring continuity of knowledge in future generations. Flooding is a constant concern. Heavy rains or sudden melting snow on higher slopes can overwhelm channels. Villagers have long experience reading the signals. Murky water carrying fine ash may indicate upstream activity, subtle changes in current hint at blockage, and minor tremors warn of potential landslides into waterways. Action is taken preemptively, clearing channels, reinforcing embankments, and relocating seedlings if necessary. Timing is crucial. A delay of hours can lead to extensive damage. Storage and distribution systems are integrated into irrigation management. Ponds or reservoirs near the village hold water for dry periods, replenished from primary channels. Excess water is diverted through overflow systems, preventing damage to structures or crops. These systems are designed for resilience rather than efficiency, allowing villagers to survive minor eruptions and seasonal anomalies with minimal loss. Even ritual is intertwined with irrigation. Shrines along channels serve as both spiritual markers and practical reminders. Offerings may be left to honor water spirits or to ensure steady flow. Chants and prayers guide collective attention during channel repairs, ensuring that workers remain focused on precise tasks. Here, spiritual observance and practical engineering are inseparable, reinforcing both cultural and survival imperatives. The interaction of ash and water is not merely a challenge. It can also be an advantage. Volcanic sediment enriches the soil, providing nutrients that improve future yields. Irrigation channels distribute this sediment strategically, preventing overaccumulation in some fields and maintaining balance across terraces. Villagers have learned, often through trial and centuries of observation, to harness the destructive potential of the mountain to sustain life. And yet, even with all precautions, uncertainty lingers. A single heavy eruption can overwhelm irrigation, wash away terraces, and saturate soil with debris. Every season is an experiment, a negotiation with forces far larger than any individual or community. The villagers' knowledge is not infallible. It is adaptive, practical, and resilient, but never absolute. As you stand on the embankment, listening to the steady flow of water over bamboo sluices, watching ash swirl in gentle eddies, you may begin to consider a quiet question. How many lifetimes of careful observation, repair, and ritual are required to transform a precarious volcanic valley into a sustainable system? And how easily can it all be undone by a single eruption? The morning unfolds slowly, and with it, the constant work of reading water. Ash continues to drift from higher slopes, settling in the channels, changing their depth and subtly altering flow patterns. You bend low over the bamboo sluice, testing for clogs, listening to the subtle sound of water over wood. One minor obstruction could divert enough water to stress a section of rice paddies. In these valleys, small mistakes have outsized consequences. Villagers organize themselves according to experience. Elders guide the maintenance of main channels, where even minor miscalculations could flood multiple fields. Adults work the secondary and tertiary channels, ensuring water reaches individual plots. Children carry water to isolated patches, check for sediment accumulation, and relay information from one end of the village to the other. The system functions like a living network, with each participant's attention critical to overall success. Ash complicates irrigation in ways that are not immediately obvious. When wet, it can form a thick, sticky layer that clogs channels and fills sluices. When dry, it turns to powder and can be carried miles by the wind, accumulating in new areas. Villagers have learned to anticipate these dynamics. Channels are cleared frequently, sluices adjusted, and diversion boards reinforced. Timing is crucial. Too early and the ash may settle elsewhere. Too late and the seedlings suffer. The rhythm of water, ash, and labor becomes a delicate dance. Rainfall adds another layer of complexity. Heavy rain can flush ash downstream, filling channels with sediment. If the flow exceeds the channel's capacity, fields are inundated, seedlings washed away, and embankments weakened. Villagers monitor upstream conditions carefully. A sudden cloudburst may prompt preemptive adjustments, the rapid clearing of smaller channels, or temporary reinforcement of terraces. Even minor misjudgments can ripple through the valley, affecting every plot. Coordination is essential. Water management is communal because one family's diversion affects another. Villagers meet at dawn, often in small groups by the main channels, to plan daily flow, determine which fields need priority, and anticipate potential hazards. These meetings are practical, but subtle ritual elements such as bowing toward the mountain or offering a small gesture of respect to water spirits reinforce attentiveness and collective responsibility. Spiritual and practical oversight converge seamlessly. Children learn these lessons incrementally. At first, they carry small loads of water to secondary channels, observing how the current moves, how ash behaves in different conditions. Over time, they assist in clearing small blockages, adjusting minor sluices, and even communicating upstream observations. Their work is mundane yet essential. Through repetition, observation, and correction, they acquire skills that will sustain the village when they become adults. Storage also plays a role in water management. Small reservoirs and ponds near the village collect excess runoff. During dry periods, these sources supplement irrigation, while overflow during wet periods prevents damage. Channels are designed with multiple redundancies, allowing water to bypass obstructions or failures. These features are practical, born of observation, yet often encoded in ritual or tradition, such as the placement of small shrines along the edges of channels to mark critical points. Ash is both threat and resource. Settling sediment enriches fields when carried into controlled irrigation, improving fertility for future planting. Villagers direct water flow to balance nutrient deposition, preventing accumulation in areas that could smother crops. Years of experience have taught that ash, if managed carefully, can turn a destructive force into a regenerative one. Even routine maintenance is demanding. Channels are inspected multiple times per day during the growing season. Small debris, stones, fallen branches, minor ash deposits is removed promptly. Wooden sluices are reinforced and occasionally replaced. Bamboo diversion boards are re-angled to optimize flow. Every adjustment requires attention to the subtle interplay of water, sediment, and human labor. Despite centuries of accumulated experience, uncertainty remains. Eruptions can overwhelm all precautions. Heavy ash, sudden flooding, or unexpected vent activity can render channels useless, destroy terraces, and ruin crops. The villagers' expertise is adaptive but not invincible. Redundancy, preparation, and constant observation mitigate risk, yet no system is entirely secure against nature's force. As the sun climbs, you notice the subtle successes. Seedlings receive adequate water, sediment is redistributed efficiently, and terraces remain intact. The irrigation network hums quietly, a testament to centuries of observation, adjustment, and collective attention. It is neither dramatic nor glamorous, but it ensures survival, proving that careful, repetitive labor can tame, even if temporarily, the unpredictable mountain environment. And as you pause at the edge of a channel, watching ash swirl in the water, you may ask yourself quietly, how many generations have perfected this balance of water, soil, and sediment? And how fragile is it really, if a single eruption could erase decades of labor in hours? The afternoon sun warms the terraces, casting long shadows across water-filled channels. The air is heavy with the faint smell of sulfur and wet earth. You walk along the main sluice, checking for minor obstructions, listening to the soft rush of water over bamboo boards. Everything seems calm, yet you know that calm is temporary. Volcanic valleys are defined by uncertainty. Water management is never complete, only continuous. A sudden gust carries ash from the slopes above. It settles lightly at first, then thickens. You kneel, brushing it from the sluice, watching as it clogs minor channels downstream. Children rush to assist, adults follow, and elders observe, correcting angles and depth of boards. Coordination is smooth, almost instinctive. Every hand knows its role, every eye watches for subtle changes. This is the culmination of centuries of learned behavior, repetition, and observation. The community responds not with panic but with precision. Channels are cleared incrementally, debris is removed in stages, and diversion boards are readjusted to balance flow across terraces. Water carries ash naturally into fields where it enriches the soil, rather than leaving it stagnating in channels. Even in disruption, there is method. What seems chaotic to an outsider is actually a carefully calibrated response. Irrigation channels are more than conduits, they are instruments of survival. Minor errors can cascade, washing away seedlings or silting terraces. But when managed effectively, they mediate the mountain's destructive potential, transforming ash and sediment into fertility. Water is both the means of life and the agent of adaptation, a living component of a delicate ecological and social system. Over decades, the village has refined this balance. Channels are layered, with primary conduits for bulk flow, secondary ones for distribution, and tertiary microchannels for precise control. Redundancy allows failures to be mitigated quickly. Ponds and reservoirs store water for dry periods, while overflow systems manage excess. Each element is integrated, informed by careful observation and repeated experience. Spiritual practices, such as offerings at water shrines or rituals to honor river spirits, guide attention, reminding villagers to maintain vigilance at all times. Even after the eruption ends, recovery is methodical. Channels are inspected, sluices reinforced, and terraces repaired. Ash is redistributed strategically to avoid suffocation of crops. Water flow is recalibrated to restore balance across the landscape. Every adjustment, every measured movement, is informed by accumulated oral knowledge and hands-on experience. The landscape becomes both a record and a participant in survival, encoding lessons from previous generations in its contours and channels. Children, now seasoned through observation, carry forward this knowledge. They understand the rhythms of water, the signals of ash, and the subtleties of sediment flow. Through apprenticeship, repetition, and minor responsibility, they are prepared to sustain the village through future eruptions. The community's resilience depends on this intergenerational transmission of practical knowledge. Yet the system is never entirely secure. One major eruption can overwhelm even the most carefully managed network. Floods, ashfall, and shifting terrain may destroy channels, terraces, and fields in a single day. Villagers accept this reality. Preparation, observation, and coordinated labor reduce risk, but they do not eliminate it. The balance is delicate, maintained only through constant attention, discipline, and experience. Modern observers would marvel at the efficiency of these medieval irrigation systems. They appear simple channels, sluices, reservoirs, but their design embodies an intimate understanding of water, ash, and volcanic dynamics. Practical knowledge, passed orally, refined through observation and labor, has created a system that both mitigates risk and leverages natural fertility. It is a quiet achievement, hidden in the mundane and often overlooked by history. Standing on the edge of the terrace, you watch water flow over bamboo boards, carrying ash gently toward the fields. There is a rhythm here: ash, water, labor, observation, repeated endlessly. It is neither dramatic nor heroic, but it is survival, persistence, and adaptation encoded in every drop of water. And as you look toward the mountain, now quiet but ever present, you may reflect on the persistent question: how can a community maintain such intricate knowledge over centuries, when a single miscalculation or an eruption far beyond precedent could undo decades of careful labor in an instant? Story 6. Living on the edge: housing and village layout in volcanic regions. You awaken to the familiar scent of ash in the air, fine gray particles drifting through the morning light as they settle on rooftops, paths, and fields. The mountain looms above the village, silent but ever present, a constant reminder that life here exists in negotiation with forces far larger than human ambition. The houses around you are modest wooden frames, thatched roofs reinforced with clay, and walls sometimes coated with mud, but their design is deliberate, honed over generations to withstand the unpredictable threats of volcanic activity. Village layout reflects this constant balancing act between safety, practicality, and tradition. Homes are clustered on slightly elevated terraces to reduce the risk of flooding from ash-laden runoff. Streets and paths are narrow, meandering, and often lined with small stone markers or shrines. These markers serve multiple purposes: as spiritual guardians, as physical guides through ash-covered ground, and as indicators of past events, such as the limits of previous lava flows or mudslides. Every house embodies adaptation. Roofs are steeply pitched to shed ash and rain quickly, with thick thatching layered to prevent collapse under weight. Clay reinforcements at critical points ensure that heavy ash or debris does not compromise structural integrity. Beams and posts are carefully selected for durability, often from local hardwoods resilient to both humidity and minor tremors. Construction is not uniform. Minor variations reflect family preferences, past experiences with eruptions, and practical lessons learned over generations. Settlements are strategically positioned relative to the mountain. Villages are rarely built in the valley floor, where lava and mud flow risk is greatest, nor too high, where wind-blown ash accumulates rapidly. Instead, homes occupy intermediate terraces, balancing accessibility to arable land, water sources, and evacuation routes. Even small features of the terrain, ridges, depressions, or natural embankments are considered when siting homes, storage granaries, and communal structures. Storage is another critical consideration. Granaries are often elevated on stilts or platforms to prevent contamination from ash and flooding. These structures are carefully ventilated to preserve rice and other grains while remaining robust enough to withstand minor earthquakes or the occasional impact of volcanic debris. Wood and clay are combined to balance breathability, strength, and resilience. Small, easily repaired features reflect a practical philosophy. If a structure can be fixed quickly, its failure does not become catastrophic. Paths between homes are deliberately winding, reducing wind-borne ash accumulation in any single area and channeling runoff safely toward drainage channels. Streets may follow irregular contours, a result of both topography and centuries of incremental adjustment after eruptions, mudslides, and floods. Markers indicate hazards or safe routes, often doubling as shrines or memorials of prior events, blending practicality and spirituality seamlessly. Even domestic layout within homes is shaped by environmental hazards. Living spaces are oriented to minimize exposure to ash-laden wind, while hearths and kitchens are positioned to ensure smoke dispersal does not exacerbate respiratory irritation during eruptions. Storage of tools, food, and water is prioritized according to risk. Heavier, sturdier containers are placed in central, stable areas. More fragile items occupy secondary spaces. Every decision reflects the constant negotiation between daily life and latent danger. Water management interacts closely with housing. Terraces, channels, and drainage systems are integrated with village layout. Paddies, reservoirs, and irrigation ditches follow natural slopes, feeding into each other while minimizing the potential for overflow during heavy rainfall or ash accumulation. Villagers move deliberately within this network, knowing that every misstep, damaged sluice, blocked channel, or neglected embankment can have cascading effects on homes and livelihoods. Community organization reinforces these physical adaptations. Homes may cluster in small groups, each maintaining responsibility for its own drainage and ash clearance, yet cooperating on shared channels and pathways. Children participate from a young age, learning both labor and observation, how to sweep roofs, monitor embankments, and clear paths, all as routine tasks intertwined with education and survival. The village is a living organism, each household an integrated part of a larger adaptive system. Safety considerations extend beyond the present. Villagers maintain multiple evacuation routes, sometimes carved paths along terraces or through nearby forests, each route informed by memory of past eruptions. Shrines or markers along these paths indicate safe zones, emergency stores, or high points. These routes are not ceremonial, they are rehearsed, checked, and maintained with the same attention as irrigation channels or granaries. Preparation is silent but meticulous. Yet even with careful planning, uncertainty remains. Eruptions can overwhelm terraces, block paths, and damage structures. Ash accumulation can exceed roof capacity, channels can overflow, and mudslides can engulf entire neighborhoods. Design and layout mitigate but do not eliminate risk. Daily life in the village is a continuous exercise in balancing comfort, functionality, and vigilance. Walking among the houses, you notice the subtleties. Clay walls reinforced at corners, low thresholds designed to resist ash intrusion, drainage ditches running alongside narrow streets, small shrines at entrances marking protection from the mountain. Each feature seems mundane, yet each reflects centuries of learning, observation, and adaptation. The village itself is a record of past eruptions and accumulated knowledge. And as you pause to watch the mountain, quiet but ever present, you may find yourself wondering, how many generations have shaped these terraces, homes, and paths, adjusting incrementally to danger, and how many more must continue this delicate negotiation before the mountain's next lesson arrives? The morning sun illuminates the village, highlighting both its practicality and its fragility. You move along narrow streets, brushing ash from the threshold of each house. Despite centuries of refinement, every home bears subtle scars from past eruptions, cracks in wooden beams, worn thatch, or patches of clay applied to reinforce weak points. These small repairs are routine, repeated enough to be mundane, yet they are essential to survival. Village organization is deeply informed by observation and history. Houses are rarely built in isolation. They form clusters. Each cluster shares responsibilities for drainage, ash clearance, and minor repairs, creating a social network that mirrors the physical infrastructure. Families coordinate labor, especially after ashfall or heavy rains, and young members are trained from childhood to perform these tasks. Participation is not optional, it is the foundation of collective resilience. Drainage systems are integrated with housing layout. Terraces channel water away from homes and fields, and small stone or clay-lined ditches guide runoff to larger irrigation systems. These channels require constant attention. Ash clogs them, debris blocks flow, and minor landslides can redirect water unexpectedly. Each adjustment is made with careful observation, trial, and memory of previous events. You learn to read channels like a map of accumulated experience, predicting weak points and potential hazards before they manifest. Rooftops demand particular attention. Thatched roofs are both flexible and absorbent, but heavy ash can quickly overwhelm them. Villagers sweep them daily during ashfall seasons, reinforcing critical areas with mud or clay as needed. Children often participate, learning not only the mechanics of roof maintenance but the subtle cues of snow or ash load that indicate imminent danger. Roof care is ritualized yet practical. It preserves life, property, and the accumulated labor of previous generations. Paths between homes and to communal areas serve multiple purposes. Their winding routes reduce the force of wind and ash deposition, direct water safely away, and provide guidance during low visibility events. Small shrines and stone markers line these paths, blending spiritual significance with practical navigation. In times of eruption, these markers help villagers traverse the village safely, maintaining communication and coordination when visibility is compromised. Community spaces, though modest, are strategically located. Small assembly areas, shrines, or open terraces function as meeting points for labor coordination, emergency gatherings, and observation of the mountain. Their placement ensures visibility across key sections of the village and access to evacuation routes. Even their design, slightly elevated, open to the sky, with clear drainage, reflects careful adaptation to both natural and social needs. Storage structures demonstrate the same principles. Granaries are raised above ground to avoid ash infiltration, with wooden floors ventilated to prevent spoilage and walls reinforced with clay to resist collapse. Provisions are rotated and stored according to both risk and practicality. Even small adjustments relocating containers, reinforcing a support beam reflect knowledge passed down through generations, often guided by stories of past failures. Evacuation planning is embedded in village layout. Paths from the village to high ground are deliberately maintained, marked by shrines, stones, or posts that indicate safe routes and hazard zones. Families rehearse routes silently, often as part of daily or seasonal labor, integrating preparation seamlessly into ordinary routines. Observation of the mountain informs timing, pace, and priority of movement, ensuring that when the mountain erupts, everyone has guidance rooted in both memory and practice. Spatial memory is reinforced through daily routines. Children grow up knowing the village by touch, sound, and subtle visual cues. They recognize landmarks in ash, water flow in channels, and even minor changes in wind direction. This intimate knowledge allows the community to respond to threats collectively, relying not on panic but on practiced attention and intergenerational learning. Despite all precautions, uncertainty remains the constant companion of life here. A heavy eruption can overwhelm terraces, block paths, and damage homes within hours. Ash can accumulate faster than roofs can be cleared. Drainage channels can fail under sudden rains or debris. Preparation mitigates risk but does not eliminate it. Adaptation, vigilance, and collective labor are the only reliable tools for survival. As the day winds down and you survey the village, you notice how each element, from roof thatching to narrow paths, from terrace plots to communal spaces, is interconnected. Practicality, observation, and collective knowledge dictate design, while spiritual markers, rituals, and stories reinforce attention and coordination. The village itself is a living record, a three-dimensional archive of adaptation, memory, and resilience. And as you gaze toward the quiet mountain, ash-dusted terraces stretching before you, a thought lingers. How many subtle adjustments, repeated over generations, have preserved this delicate balance between human settlement and a volatile natural world? And how many of these adaptations could fail if the mountain chooses to act in a way no story, path, or roof has ever prepared for? The afternoon is quiet, but the air carries a tension only the mountain can command. A light ashfall begins, settling across terraces and rooftops. You move along narrow streets, brushing particles from thresholds and paths, your attention sharpened by years of habitual observation. Every feature of the village, the arrangement of houses, the layout of channels, the positioning of granaries is put to the subtle test of the day. Houses absorb the first signs of disruption. Thatch bends under the weight of ash, wooden beams creak softly, and clarion-forced walls flex minutely. Families move deliberately, sweeping roofs, clearing drainage channels, adjusting sluices, and monitoring the weight of accumulated ash. The rhythm of activity is calm yet precise, each gesture informed by centuries of practical knowledge and previous experience. Community coordination is critical. Elders oversee clusters of homes, instructing the young and inexperienced on priorities, which roofs must be cleared first, which channels require immediate attention, and which granaries are most vulnerable. Communication is quiet gestures, short calls, subtle signals avoiding panic while maintaining efficiency. Children, now familiar with every path, every terrace, and every marker, move fluidly through the village, carrying out tasks that ensure both safety and continuity. Ash continues to fall, thickening over time. Paths are brushed repeatedly, roofs swept in incremental stages, and water channels cleared to prevent clogging. Even small miscalculations, a missed patch of roof, a partially blocked channel could have cascading effects. Yet the villagers' coordination, built through shared labor and collective memory, allows the system to function effectively. Practicality, attention, and repetition create resilience, even amid ongoing volcanic activity. Storage structures endure scrutiny. Elevated granaries, ventilated floors, and clarion-forced walls are tested as ash settles around them. You inspect each in turn, noting small signs of stress, slight sagging in a floorboard, minor cracks in a wall, or displaced tiles. Each anomaly is addressed immediately, the repair minor in isolation but vital to long-term survival. Years of adaptation have made these interventions routine, almost automatic but no less critical. Paths between homes, narrow and winding, prove their worth. The layout disperses ash and runoff, channeling debris into prepared drainage systems. Small shrines and stone markers guide movement when visibility declines. Families move through these paths efficiently, guided by memory and observation. Children, trained from early age, anticipate where hazards may appear, mitigating risk with both speed and care. The village functions as an organism, coordinated, attentive, and resilient. Even spiritual practices retain a practical dimension. Ritual offerings at shrines, quiet chants during maintenance, and gestures of respect for water and mountain spirits serve dual purposes. They reinforce attentiveness, focus labor, and encode accumulated knowledge into routine action. Faith and practicality merge seamlessly, with ritual acting as both social glue and method of risk management. By evening, the ashfall begins to subside. The village is dusted in a uniform gray layer, but structures have held, terraces remain intact, and irrigation channels continue to carry water to the paddies. Families gather briefly near central shrines to assess conditions, exchange observations, and record minor adjustments. Stories of small near misses, subtle successes, and precise interventions are noted for future retelling. These accounts, though mundane, will become part of the oral memory that guides future generations. The village's resilience is apparent, yet fragility remains. A larger eruption could overwhelm terraces, channels, and homes within hours. Even this carefully designed layout cannot guarantee survival against all events. The strength lies in preparation, attention, and intergenerational learning, a system that continuously adapts, but never claims absolute security. Walking along the terraces as twilight descends, you see the careful integration of architecture, water management, communal labor, and ritual. Every element reflects lessons learned from centuries of observation, adaptation, and repetition. Practical design and spiritual guidance coexist, forming a system that protects life and preserves knowledge in a volatile environment. And as you stand at the edge of the village, watching the mountain silhouette against the darkening sky, a quiet reflection emerges. The village is both fragile and enduring, built upon countless subtle decisions, shared labor, and careful observation. How many generations will need to continue this delicate balance, repeating these patterns before the mountain's next test arrives, and how many lessons will survive the next eruption to guide them? Story 7. The hidden harvest: agriculture and soil fertility in volcanic valleys. You step into the fields as dawn breaks, the soft gray light of morning filtered through a thin layer of lingering ash. The soil beneath your feet is dark, almost black, textured with fine particles left behind by previous eruptions. To an untrained eye, it may look barren or dangerous, but you know better. This soil is a hidden treasure. It carries nutrients deposited over centuries, minerals that sustain rice paddies, root vegetables, and grains. Life here depends on understanding the quiet interplay between volcanic activity and agriculture, a delicate balance refined over generations. The valley is terraced, a method born of necessity. Slopes are steep and water flows rapidly. Without terraces, precious topsoil would wash away during rains or be buried under volcanic sediment. These terraces also channel water efficiently into paddies, allowing careful control of flooding, irrigation, and drainage. Each level is reinforced with stone walls or compacted earth, sometimes augmented with bamboo or wooden supports. Construction is precise, repetitive, and grounded in long experience. Ashfall adds complexity. A light coating can enrich the soil, depositing phosphorus, potassium, and trace minerals critical to plant growth. Too much ash, however, smothers seedlings and interferes with photosynthesis. Villagers respond with care, light raking to redistribute ash, careful watering to prevent suffocation, and monitoring for damage. Observation is constant, and action is deliberate. Even minor miscalculations can reduce yields dramatically. Irrigation interacts with fertility in subtle ways. Channels carry not just water but mineral-rich sediment, distributing it evenly across terraces. Villagers know how to balance flow, ensuring that the nutrient-rich deposits enhance the soil without overwhelming plants. Timing is critical. Too early, and heavy rains may wash sediment away. Too late, and seedlings may be damaged by compacted ash. Every season becomes a negotiation with both water and soil. Crop selection is informed by experience with volcanic soils. Rice dominates lower terraces, thriving in standing water with mineral deposits. Root vegetables and barley occupy higher terraces, more resilient to ash accumulation and lighter soils. Crop rotation and interplanting maintain soil fertility and reduce risk of failure. Villagers experiment incrementally, observing which plots perform best under varying conditions, adjusting planting patterns based on subtle shifts in ash composition, water flow, and prior yields. Soil management extends beyond planting. Composting, mulching, and partial tilling maintain soil structure and enhance nutrient availability. Villagers recognize that volcanic sediment can change pH, affecting fertility. Lime or ash redistribution is sometimes employed to counteract acidity or improve texture. Observations of plant growth, color, and vigor inform these adjustments, creating a continuous feedback loop between land and labor. Labor is communal. Families coordinate planting, watering, and harvesting, sharing knowledge and resources. Children learn early, observing soil texture, recognizing ash accumulation, and understanding which plants thrive under which conditions. Skills are embedded in routine work, ensuring intergenerational transfer of knowledge. Practical expertise is inseparable from daily life, and every task sweeping ash, adjusting water flow, inspecting seedlings reinforces observation, patience, and attention. Pests and disease are also managed attentively. Ash can act as a natural deterrent for certain insects, but excessive coverage can foster fungal growth. Villagers watch for signs of distress, adjusting irrigation, planting density, and ash distribution. Observation is slow, meticulous, and cumulative. Subtle color changes in leaves, small deviations in growth, or unusual insect behavior can signal potential problems. These cues are woven into a larger understanding of the valley's ecology. Even small rituals influence agricultural success. Offerings at field shrines, seasonal prayers, and ceremonial planting reinforce attentiveness. While these acts are symbolic, they structure labor and observation, ensuring that work is repeated, careful, and consistent. Ritual is not superstition. It is an organizational tool, a guide for human attention across an unpredictable landscape. Despite centuries of refinement, uncertainty is never eliminated. A sudden eruption can bury terraces, change drainage, or poison water with sulfur. Even careful management cannot guarantee harvests, and each season carries risk. Yet villagers persist, adapting incrementally, using observation, memory, and labor to negotiate survival with a mountain that is both provider and threat. As you walk across terraces, feeling the texture of nutrient-rich volcanic soil and watching water ripple across paddies, a thought emerges. How many generations have coaxed life from this ash, balancing risk and fertility? And how fragile is this hidden abundance if the mountain chooses to erupt beyond all prior experience? The morning sunlight glints off wet terraces, and you notice how carefully every field has been prepared. Irrigation channels weave between plots, carrying water that both nourishes crops and distributes mineral-rich ash. Walking along the terraces, you see the subtle differences in soil texture: darker, heavier patches where sediment has settled, lighter areas where erosion has removed the top layer. Villagers monitor these variations constantly, adjusting planting and water flow accordingly. Seedlings in lower terraces thrive in standing water, their green tips emerging from pools enriched with volcanic minerals. Higher terraces host barley and root vegetables, planted with deliberate spacing to maximize nutrient absorption and reduce competition. Every planting decision reflects centuries of observation: which crops withstand ash accumulation, which varieties respond best to varying moisture levels, and which areas require soil amendments to prevent decline in fertility. Ashfall today is moderate, a thin dusting across leaves and water. It is both a blessing and a potential hazard. Villagers move deliberately, brushing excess ash from delicate seedlings while letting smaller particles enrich the soil. This hands-on management is guided by observation and memory. The ash from prior eruptions serves as a record of timing, quantity, and distribution, informing how much intervention is necessary to preserve yields without washing away nutrients. The communal nature of agriculture is apparent. Families work side by side, exchanging knowledge about soil conditions, water levels, and crop progress. Children observe every task, learning how to gauge soil texture by touch, recognize early signs of stress in plants, and understand the intricate relationship between water, ash, and fertility. Labor is also a learning process, an apprenticeship in careful attention that will sustain the village through future eruptions. Irrigation requires constant vigilance. Sediment can accumulate unevenly, clogging channels or altering water distribution. Villagers check sluices, remove small blockages, and sometimes adjust terraces themselves to prevent flooding or stagnation. Water flow is measured intuitively, guided by centuries of experience, and minute adjustments ensure that all terraces receive appropriate moisture without erosion or loss of nutrients. The interplay of ash, soil, and water is subtle. Too much sediment in one area can smother plants, too little reduces fertility. The villagers have developed techniques to redistribute ash strategically, sweeping it from channels into depleted terraces, adjusting irrigation to deposit fine sediment gradually, or layering compost and mulch with volcanic soil to optimize texture and nutrient content. This is not guesswork. It is applied observation honed over generations. Seasonal labor is organized around the mountain's patterns. Planting and harvesting schedules consider rainfall, ashfall history, and water availability. Elders recall specific years, noting how variations in eruption frequency, sediment deposition, and moisture influenced yields. These experiences are embedded in oral history guiding decisions each season. Lessons are practical, specific, and repeatedly reinforced. Even minor interventions carry significance. Removing a few stones from a terrace edge, adjusting a sluice board slightly, or redistributing sediment from one plot to another may seem trivial, but they maintain balance across the entire system. Incremental action prevents cumulative failures, demonstrating that survival in volcanic valleys relies not on dramatic heroics but on meticulous, repetitive care. The village's approach to pest and disease management is similarly adaptive. Volcanic ash can deter certain insects, but excess ash or stagnant water encourages fungal growth. Observation is critical. Leaves are inspected for color change, texture, or insect presence, and small adjustments to irrigation or soil composition mitigate emerging problems. Each decision reflects accumulated empirical knowledge, passed from elders to younger villagers, forming a network of practical understanding. By midday, the work of observation, adjustment, and labor creates a delicate equilibrium. Crops receive water and nutrients, terraces remain intact, and ash is both managed and leveraged. The villagers' intimate understanding of the valley's soil, water, and volcanic dynamics transforms the apparent chaos of the environment into a functioning, productive system. It is a quiet triumph, almost invisible, but essential for life. And as you pause to examine the ripple of water carrying mineral-rich ash across terraces, a question emerges. How many generations have perfected this subtle interplay of soil, water, and observation? And how many seasons might be lost if the mountain changes its behavior beyond all known patterns? The sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across terraces still glistening with water. You kneel beside a patch of rice, observing the way the ash-enriched soil supports healthy growth. Tiny ripples form in the surface water as the wind shifts, carrying the subtle scent of minerals from the slopes above. For all its calm, you know the mountain remains unpredictable, capable of erasing months of careful labor in hours. Yet here, in these terraces, generations have learned to negotiate with its power. Harvest planning is as meticulous as planting. Villagers monitor soil conditions, water levels, and crop maturity daily. Ash from earlier eruptions has settled unevenly, so workers adjust irrigation, redistribute sediment, and occasionally supplement with compost or mulch to maintain fertility. Decisions are informed by centuries of observation: which terraces retain nutrients, which seedlings need extra care, and how minor adjustments will affect overall yield. Each action is deliberate, cautious, and repetitive. Community labor ensures efficiency and knowledge transfer. Families rotate tasks, some tending to irrigation, others clearing ash, while children observe and assist. These routines are mundane yet essential. The repetition of work reinforces patterns of attention, ensuring that knowledge of soil behavior, water flow, and ash management is preserved across generations. Survival here is cumulative, a product of small, precise interventions executed consistently. Even during minor ash falls, villagers take care to prevent soil compaction or nutrient loss. Ash is brushed lightly from seedlings that might suffocate, while excess particles in channels are directed to areas where they will enhance fertility. Every action demonstrates a balance between intervention and observation. The villagers do not attempt to dominate the environment, only to guide it in ways that support long-term productivity. Irrigation continues to be central. Channels are cleared, sluice boards adjusted, and terraces reinforced. Sediment flows are carefully monitored, ensuring nutrients reach all parts of the fields. A small misstep overwatering, blocked channels, or uneven sediment deposition could reduce yield, so attention to detail is constant. Here, labor and observation are inseparable, creating a rhythm that carries knowledge forward while sustaining life. The subtle intelligence embedded in terrace agriculture extends beyond water and soil. Planting schedules are adjusted based on ash patterns, rainfall history, and the mountain's moods. Crop selection balances resilience and fertility, with rice dominating low terraces and hardier grains and vegetables higher up. Rotation and intercropping reduce disease risk, maintain soil structure, and optimize nutrient use. Every choice is informed by repeated observation and experience, not formal education or written records. Ritual and memory reinforce agricultural practice. Small shrines mark terraces, with offerings left to honor the spirits of soil and water. Planting and harvesting seasons are punctuated by prayers and quiet reflection, ensuring that work is both deliberate and attentive. These ceremonies are not magical thinking, they are organizational tools, reinforcing focus, coordination, and intergenerational transmission of empirical knowledge. By evening, terraces glimmer with health. Water flows smoothly, ash is integrated into the soil, and seedlings stand resilient. The quiet triumph of careful observation and repeated labor is evident, yet fragility remains. A heavier eruption, unexpected rainfall, or sudden landslide could undo the season's work in moments. Villagers accept this uncertainty, understanding that their skill lies not in controlling the mountain, but in adapting to it. As you walk along a narrow path between terraces, you see the tangible results of centuries of incremental learning. Fertile soil enriched by ash, channels that carry water reliably across complex slopes, and seedlings thriving under careful management. The valley itself records experience. Every terrace, embankment, and irrigation channel reflects lessons learned and applied over generations. And as the sun sets behind the mountain, casting its shadow across the ash-flecked fields, a quiet reflection emerges. The mountain provides both challenge and gift, and human survival depends not on conquering it, but on the patient, repetitive work of listening, observing, and guiding the hidden harvest that lies within its fertile soils. Yet the ultimate question lingers. How long can generations maintain this delicate balance if the mountain's next lesson arrives in a way no story, terrace, or channel has ever prepared for? Story 8. Guardians of the Slope Livestock, Herding and Mountain Animals. The valley stirs quietly at dawn, with the soft murmur of water over terraces and the faint rustle of ash underfoot. Beyond the fields, livestock graze cautiously along the slope's goats, cattle, and a few hardy pigs, each adapted to life near the mountain. Their movements are slow, deliberate, and observant, guided by instinct honed over generations. For villagers living in medieval Japanese volcanic regions, managing these animals is as essential as managing soil and water. Livestock are both sustenance and warning system, reflecting the subtle rhythms of the environment. Herding is not a casual task. Goats, in particular, are sentinels of volcanic activity, sensitive to tremors, vibrations, and changes in air quality. Their behavior provides early warnings of eruptions or toxic gas emissions. Villagers learn to interpret subtle signals, a sudden restlessness, hurried movement toward higher ground, or an unusual pattern of bleeding. These observations, repeated and shared within the community, form a quiet but vital layer of early warning knowledge. Cattle and pigs serve complementary roles. Beyond providing meat, milk, or labor, they interact with the terrain in ways that affect soil fertility and erosion control. Cattle grazing on terraces helps compact soil slightly, stabilizing embankments, while pigs, foraging carefully, disturb the surface in ways that aerate volcanic soil and redistribute mineral-rich ash. These effects are subtle but cumulative, enhancing agricultural productivity while maintaining the health of slopes vulnerable to mudslides. Daily herding is organized methodically. Villagers guide livestock along established paths to minimize ash accumulation and prevent erosion. These routes often follow natural terraces, stone markers, and small shrines, blending practicality with spiritual guidance. Children participate early, learning the rhythms of animals, recognizing warning behaviors, and understanding the layout of pastures relative to the mountain slopes. Observation is continuous, repetition is routine, and learning is hands-on. Water access is tightly controlled. Streams and small reservoirs near pastures are shared between humans and animals, carefully monitored for contamination by ash or debris. Livestock are led in groups to minimize stress and prevent damage to fragile terraces. Water distribution mirrors the complexity of irrigation management. Redundancy, observation, and careful coordination ensure survival of both animals and humans in a landscape defined by volcanic uncertainty. The mountain's temperament influences herding strategies. Periods of seismic unrest require livestock to be moved to higher or safer ground. Families have memorized multiple routes, marked by subtle physical or ritual indicators. These evacuations are not frantic. They are deliberate, practiced, and rehearsed. Children learn these routes alongside adults, memorizing signs in terrain and animal behavior that signal danger. In this way, livestock management is inseparable from disaster preparedness. Animals themselves serve as teachers. A goat refusing to graze may indicate a subtle shift in air quality. Pigs rooting uneasily can signal unstable terrain. Villagers read these behaviors carefully, combining observation with oral history to interpret potential hazards. Over generations, these subtle signals become codified into practical wisdom, often embedded in stories or mnemonic rituals to guide future herders. Fencing and containment are minimal yet functional. Stone walls, wooden stakes, and temporary barriers define pastures while accommodating the mountain's unpredictable changes. These structures must be flexible. Mudslides, ashfall, or minor eruptions may destroy them partially, requiring immediate repair or adjustment. Villagers prioritize adaptability over permanence, reinforcing the principle that resilience comes from observation, preparation, and flexibility rather than rigid construction. Livestock also shape social and economic life. Herds are both family wealth and communal resource. Sharing animals, coordinating grazing routes, and assisting in emergencies strengthens bonds across households. Labor is communal, observation is shared, and knowledge accumulates collectively. Children internalize these lessons, understanding the interconnectedness of animal management, environmental monitoring, and survival in a volcanic landscape. Yet uncertainty is constant. A sudden eruption can scatter herds, contaminate water sources, and destroy pastures. Even the most attentive herders cannot control the mountain, only anticipate and mitigate risks. Survival relies on vigilance, careful observation, and repetition of proven strategies, combined with flexibility when the environment deviates from known patterns. As you follow the herd along a terrace lined with ash-laden grass, watching goats pause and shift uneasily, a thought emerges. How many subtle signals have gone unnoticed in centuries past, and how much of a community's survival depends on the quiet, almost invisible, interactions between animals, humans, and a mountain that constantly reminds them of its power. The sun climbs higher, casting long shadows across the terraces where livestock graze. Goats nudge one another cautiously, cows pause to drink from sediment-rich streams, and pigs root gently in the mineral-laden soil. The villagers move among them, guiding, observing, and adjusting. Every step, every gesture is deliberate. Herding here is a science, built on centuries of observation and repeated practice. Early morning inspections are routine. Elders and experienced herders examine animal behavior closely. A goat scratching its flank repeatedly may suggest stress or discomfort caused by ash inhalation. Cattle moving hesitantly along a familiar path may indicate a minor shift in terrain caused by tremors. Even subtle changes in pig behavior, rooting more aggressively or avoiding certain patches of soil, are noted and interpreted. Observation is constant and meticulous, forming a continuous feedback loop that guides both labor and planning. The placement of pastures and grazing routes reflects adaptation to the volcanic landscape. Steeper slopes are reserved for hardier animals, while gentler terraces host livestock more sensitive to ash accumulation or unstable ground. Paths are deliberately designed to minimize erosion, channel water safely, and allow for quick evacuation if seismic activity increases. These routes are memorized by all villagers, reinforced through repetition, and marked subtly with stones, shrines, or bamboo stakes. Water management intersects closely with herding. Streams carry both life and hazard. Mineral-rich runoff can nourish plants but harm animals if concentrated in stagnant pools. Villagers carefully monitor water flow, diverting channels as needed to balance access for humans, crops, and livestock. Even slight miscalculations in water distribution can affect soil fertility, grazing quality, and animal health. Labor, observation, and memory are woven seamlessly into daily routines. Children continue to learn by participation. They accompany elders, observing herd movement, identifying warning behaviors, and memorizing evacuation routes. They help lead animals along terraces, adjust minor barriers, and clear debris from paths. Through hands-on experience, they internalize the mountain's rhythms, the animals' subtle cues, and the interconnectedness of the ecosystem. Practical knowledge is embedded in every task, quietly passed down through observation and repetition. The villagers also anticipate the mountain's moods. Minor tremors prompt temporary relocation of animals to safer terraces. Ashfall triggers adjustments in grazing. Livestock may be moved to higher ground where wind has deposited less debris. Even changes in temperature, rainfall, or soil composition inform decisions about herd placement. Observation, memory, and incremental adaptation are the foundation of survival, reducing risk without assuming certainty. Fences, barriers, and temporary enclosures are minimal but essential. Stones, bamboo, and wooden stakes define grazing zones and protect younger animals. These structures are flexible, easily repaired if damaged by rain, minor eruptions, or mudslides. Permanence is avoided. Adaptability is prioritized. In this environment, resilience derives from flexibility, attention, and collective experience rather than rigid engineering. Pastoral knowledge is intertwined with agricultural observation. Animals affect soil structure and fertility, and villagers guide grazing to complement crops. Cattle trample lightly, stabilizing terrace embankments. Pigs redistribute volcanic sediment as they forage, enhancing fertility. Goats feed selectively, reducing the risk of overgrowth and maintaining paths. These interactions are subtle, cumulative, and deliberately managed. Survival in the valley relies on this quiet orchestration of life, observation, and labor. Even small details matter. Water containers are cleaned regularly to prevent ash contamination. Sluices in pastures are adjusted to redirect runoff. Children learn to recognize shifts in animal posture or behavior that indicate minor environmental changes. These seemingly mundane observations are critical to long-term survival, forming an intricate network of monitoring that blends experience, intuition, and communal knowledge. Yet uncertainty remains. A larger eruption could overwhelm the terraces, scatter herds, and contaminate water. Even the most careful management cannot fully control the mountain's power. Villagers accept this, preparing contingencies, reinforcing key paths, and maintaining multiple grazing areas. Observation, repetition, and flexibility are their defenses, providing resilience in a landscape defined by both bounty and risk. As you watch the herd navigate terraces, pausing at streams, grazing cautiously among ash-flecked grass, you notice the quiet interdependence of animal and human life. Every step, movement, and decision reflects generations of learning. And a question lingers. How many centuries of subtle observation and incremental adaptation are required to sustain this delicate balance? And how quickly could it unravel if the mountain's next eruption defies all precedent? The afternoon sun warms the terraces, and the valley hums with quiet life. Goats nibble selectively on ash-tipped grass, cattle move steadily along their usual paths, and pigs root gently in patches of nutrient-rich soil. The villagers follow behind, attending to minor adjustments, shifting barriers, guiding animals away from unstable slopes, and checking water channels for blockages caused by ash or sediment. Each task is small and repetitive, yet vital to the survival of both livestock and community. Evacuation planning is woven into daily routines. Even in calm periods, herders remain aware of the mountain's subtle signals, faint tremors, rising smoke, or changes in animal behavior. Goats, especially sensitive to air quality and vibration, often serve as the first warning system. Their restlessness alerts the villagers to potential danger long before humans would notice. When signals intensify, families move animals along pre-memorized paths to higher terraces or safer areas, sometimes carrying young or weaker livestock for protection. These routes are rehearsed regularly, ensuring that evacuation is efficient, coordinated, and low stress for both animals and people. Water management is ongoing. Streams and reservoirs supplying livestock must remain uncontaminated and accessible. Sluices are adjusted to divert ash-laden runoff, while terraces are reinforced to prevent erosion. Villagers balance the competing needs of animals, crops, and human consumption, using centuries of observation to make subtle but effective adjustments. Even minor miscalculations can have cumulative consequences, so vigilance is constant. Observation of livestock extends beyond immediate survival. Villagers study behavior to anticipate environmental changes. A goat that refuses to graze may indicate ash accumulation or toxic fumes. Pigs that alter rooting patterns can signal shifting soil stability. Cattle moving irregularly can hint at tremors or hidden erosion. Over generations, these observations are encoded into oral traditions, guiding future herders in recognizing the mountain's moods. Knowledge is preserved not in books, but in repeated attention and communal memory. Children's participation remains central. They follow elders, monitor animals, and maintain minor pathways or fences. Each task is an exercise in observation, learning, and coordination. Practical skills are transmitted alongside subtle environmental awareness. By adolescence, a child can interpret animal behavior, adjust grazing patterns, and help coordinate evacuation if needed. The survival of both livestock and humans depends on this intergenerational transfer of knowledge. Even with careful preparation, uncertainty persists. A large eruption could overwhelm pastures, scatter herds, and compromise water supplies. Despite the community's best efforts, control is always partial. The villagers understand that resilience is not about eliminating risk, but about minimizing it through observation, preparation, and collective action. Their strategy is simple in principle but complex in execution. Attention, repetition, and adaptation are the only reliable safeguards. As the day wanes, livestock are returned to enclosures or resting areas. Animals are healthy, water flows steadily, and ash is managed across terraces. The system functions smoothly, a testament to centuries of trial, observation, and refinement. It is a quiet, persistent achievement, almost invisible to outsiders, yet vital to survival in this volatile environment. Standing on a terrace, watching goats move cautiously along ridges and pigs root in enriched soil, you realize that the village and its animals operate as a single organism. Human labor, observation, and knowledge are inseparable from the rhythms of livestock and the mountain itself. Each gesture, movement, and decision reflects centuries of learning. And as you gaze toward the mountain, silent yet ever present, a question lingers in the air. How many generations of careful observation, subtle adjustment, and attentive labor will it take to preserve this delicate relationship between humans, animals, and a mountain, capable of reshaping their lives in moments? and how much of this wisdom could be lost if a single eruption surpasses all memory.